Deborah, you can't just barge in here and slap a fine on my door for trimming my hedges a little too close to the property line, I said, voice low but steady, gripping the edge of the kitchen counter as she stood there with that smug smirk. You want to enforce the rules? Fine, but this? It's harassment. Deborah raised an eyebrow, folding her arms like she owned the place. Mark, rules are rules. You know the HOA has final say on these things. Yeah, well, I wrote the firmware for that digital gate system you rely on to control access. That motion sensor on your side, still connected to my server. You think you've got the power here? Not without me. I'm Mark Davison, mid-30s, IT consultant by trade, homeowner by inheritance, and not someone who backs down from protecting what's mine. This house isn't just bricks and mortar. It's my dad's legacy. The place where I learned to build, to fight, and to hold my ground. The old oak tree out back, the one he planted before I was born, it's my quiet reminder that some roots run deeper than HOA bylaw. So now, Deborah's standing there, caught between her rules and my reality. And I'm just getting started. Where are you watching from? Let me know below. And if you want to see how this all unfolds, hit subscribe now, because this fight's far from over. Deborah didn't say a word after I dropped that on her, like I just shoved a brick into a glass door and was waiting for it to shatter. Instead, she fixed me with this stare, like she was recalculating her options. Then, without a word, she turned and left. No slammed doors, no threats. Just the sound of her heels clicking down the porch steps like a ticking clock. That night, I sat in the quiet of our living room, Emily beside me, the glow from the street lamp casting long shadows through the curtains. She didn't ask me what I was thinking. She didn't need to. The tension between us was thick enough to taste. Deborah's not going to back down, she finally said, voice soft but certain. You need to be ready. This isn't just about hedges anymore. I nodded, remembering the last conversation I had with Dad, right here in this room. He'd planted that oak tree in the backyard, said it was a marker, a testament. Some things are worth standing up for, he told me once, even if it means standing alone. The next morning, the HOA board meeting was scheduled. I knew it wasn't just a formality. They wanted to see how much pushback they'd get. Walking in, I caught familiar faces in the crowd, neighbors uneasy but silent, watching the power plays unfold like some twisted game of chess. Deborah was there too, clipboard in hand, eyes sharp as a hawk. As soon as I took my seat, she leaned over and whispered, "You're making this personal, Mark. Watch your step." I didn't bite. Instead, I pulled out my phone and started recording discreetly. If they wanted a battle, I was going to make sure every unfair move was documented. The meeting started with the usual hoopla, parking violations, mailbox rules, paint colors, boring. Then suddenly Deborah brought up the ongoing landscaping infractions at my property, phrased like a slow drip of poison, designed to make me look reckless and defiant. I stood up, voice calm but firm. I've already addressed those concerns. Every change I made respects the property line, complies with regulations, and I have photos to prove it. A few neighbors shifted uncomfortably. I could feel the undercurrent. Their loyalty divided, unsure if the HOA's heavy hand was justified or just bullying. Then came the twist. One of the board members, Linda, spoke up. "Mark, it's not just the hedges. There have been complaints about unauthorized modifications. Your gate sensor, security cameras, apparently they're connected to systems outside our jurisdiction. Isn't that right?" I didn't flinch. That's correct. I designed those systems myself. It's my property and my security. The HOA has no control over it. Murmurs spread through the room. Some nodded. Others looked confused, maybe intimidated. After the meeting, I walked home with Emily. The neighborhood felt different, like the air had shifted, quiet but charged. Over the next few days, more notices arrived. Fines for unauthorized devices, threats to disable my gate system remotely, even a letter accusing me of undermining HOA governance. It was petty but persistent. That's when I realized this wasn't about rules. It was about control. I started setting up a system to track everything, every letter, every interaction, every violation they threw my way. I took photos of the infrascrapas, making sure to capture dates and times. Emily helped too. Her steady presence reminded me this fight was bigger than just property lines. It was about standing up for fairness, for legacy. One afternoon, while clearing the backyard, my fingers brushed the rough bark of that oak tree Dad planted. I traced the scarred grooves, thinking about how deeply roots can hold firm, even through storms. And this battle with the HOA was shaping up to be one hell of a storm. The next neighborhood gathering wasn't supposed to be a showdown, just a casual barbecue in Mrs. Parker's backyard, the kind where you nod politely and trade small talk about summer storms or lawn care. But with the tension bubbling under the surface, it felt more like a powder keg. Helen Garcia was there, as usual, standing near the edge, quietly observing. She's one of those neighbors who keeps to herself mostly, but you can tell she's sharp. A longtime HOA board member, she's been around long enough to see this power game unfold a dozen times. Only this time, it was personal. I caught her eye across the lawn, and for a moment I thought about walking over. Instead, I let her approach me. "Mark," she said, voice low, almost hesitant, "I've seen what you're dealing with, and it's not right." Her hands trembled slightly as she fiddled with her bracelet. "But you gotta be careful. She's got claws." I nodded, appreciating the warning. "Thanks, Helen. I'm figuring that out." She glanced around nervously, like the very bushes had ears. "There's things you don't know, about the board, about Vivian. It's not just rules or petty fines, it's—" Her voice trailed off, and she swallowed hard. "It's manipulation, control." Her admission hit harder than any threat Deborah had thrown at me. I wanted to press, but she shook her head. "Not here. Not now." Emily joined us then, offering a reassuring smile that seemed to anchor the moment. Helen's eyes flickered between us. "I want to help, but I'm scared. Vivian's ruthless." We didn't talk more, but the seed was planted. Helen wasn't just an onlooker. She was a potential ally trapped in the same web. Later that week, while I was installing additional cameras around the property, I caught sight of Deborah peering through the fence, clipboard clutched like a weapon. She didn't see me, but I could feel her gaze burning a hole through the privacy I'd fought so hard to protect. Emily nudged me gently. "Don't let it get under your skin." Easier said than done. That night I sat with a stack of HOA notices, cross-referencing every complaint, every fine. The pattern was clear, an orchestrated campaign designed to wear me down. I pulled out the photo of Dad with the oak tree, his weathered hands resting on the rough bark, a quiet promise etched in every line. He'd built this house from scratch, fought to keep it in the family. I wasn't about to let some overbearing board tear it apart. The following weekend, I finally decided to attend a full HOA board meeting. It wasn't a public event. Most residents didn't even realize meetings were held in that old community center room. But I managed to get on the agenda under public comments. The room was stale, lit by harsh fluorescent bulbs that buzzed quietly. Vivian presided, her posture regal, like a queen surveying her court. As I spoke, I felt the weight of every eye in the room, some curious, others hostile. "Look," I said, voice steady, "I'm not here to fight neighbors. I'm here because the rules have been weaponized, because the person enforcing them is abusing her power, and because I intend to prove it." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Vivian smiled thinly. "Allegations require evidence, Mr. Davison. Without that, you're just a disgruntled homeowner making noise." I pulled out my phone, switched on the recording, and began detailing the timeline. Unauthorized entries, master key misuse, inflated fines, names, dates, documentation. Helen sat silently in the back, her fingers clasped tightly. When I finished, Vivian leaned forward. "You think you're the only one watching? The HOA has eyes everywhere." I met her gaze without flinching. "Good, then you'll know exactly what's coming." Leaving the meeting, Emily squeezed my hand. "You're making waves, Mark. They're not gonna like it." But I felt a strange calm, like I'd finally stepped out from the shadows. That night, I dreamed of the oak tree again, roots tangled deep beneath the earth, unyielding, a silent sentinel in the dark. Whatever came next, I wasn't alone. The morning after that meeting, the mailbox was stuffed with another envelope stamped in red, "Final Warning." I tore it open, same vague accusations, same empty threats about towing my car and suspending my community privileges. But this time, something was different. They'd started slipping in personal digs, like someone reading between the lines of my family history. Emily read it over my shoulder, shaking her head. They're getting desperate, you can tell. I folded the letter slowly, feeling the weight of every word. This wasn't just about rules anymore. It was a power play, a slow squeeze to break me. That day I met Helen again, this time on the sidewalk as she watered her rose bushes. The scent of damp earth mixed with the faint perfume of her flowers. She looked distracted, glancing over her shoulder like she expected shadows to follow. "You're holding up, I see," she said without a smile. "Trying," I admitted, "but they're turning neighbors against me, rumors spreading fast." Helen nodded, lowering the hose. "Vivian's good at that. She plays the game dirty. I've seen what she did to the Carters a few years back, broke them down bit by bit. Nobody wants to be next." "Well, haven't you spoken up before?" Her eyes flickered with something. Fear? Regret? "I'm caught. The board isn't just power, it's a network, and Vivian's at the center. She's ruthless." I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. "But you want to help, right?" She nodded, biting her lip. "I want to, I just don't know how without consequences." Later that week, Emily and I spent hours reviewing every piece of correspondence, every rule the HOA cited. I cross-checked the property codes against local laws, parsing legal jargon like a puzzle. Emily's voice broke the silence. "Dad would have been proud." I smiled, though the knot in my stomach tightened. He'd say, "Don't let him take what's yours without a fight." That night, as the house settled into silence, I stepped onto the porch. The oak tree swayed gently, leaves whispering secrets. I traced a finger along the rough bark, feeling connected to the past and the fight ahead. The next morning, I installed extra cameras around the property's perimeter. No flashing lights, no obvious signs, just quiet, constant watchfulness. If they thought they could sneak around or intimidate, they were wrong. The neighborhood was quieter now, like everyone was holding their breath. At the grocery store, I caught sidelong glances, some curious, others wary. The social currents were shifting. Then came the call from the local property lawyer I'd contacted through an online forum. A quick, no-nonsense voice promising a free initial consultation. "We've seen this kind of thing before," she said. "HOAs can get carried away, but they have limits. Trespassing, unauthorized use of master keys, harassment, that's serious. You've got a strong case if you're prepared." That call was a lifeline. I shared the news with Emily over coffee, watching her eyes light up for the first time in weeks. We're not alone in this. It wasn't just about technology or bylaws anymore. It was a fight for respect, for dignity, for legacy. The following weekend, I caught Deborah inspecting the sidewalk outside my house again. This time, I stepped out, phone in hand. "Everything all right?" I asked, voice steady. She looked startled, clearly not expecting confrontation. "Just making sure you're not breaking any new rules," she said, forcing a smile. "I'm keeping an eye too," I replied, camera rolling discreetly. Her smile faltered. That small moment felt like a turning point. Back inside, Emily wrapped her arms around me. "We've got this." Her strength fueled mine. This wasn't just a property dispute, it was a stand against overreach, against intimidation. And I was ready. The basement smelled like a forgotten story, the kind that clings to dusty air, wrapped in the quiet creak of old floorboards and the faint rustle of cobwebs. I hadn't been down here in months, not since Dad's passing, but now, as I flicked on the shaky flashlight, I realized this was where the next piece of the puzzle might lie. Boxes lined the walls, some labeled with Dad's neat handwriting, others just brown and battered. I knelt down, blowing off decades of dust from a stack near the far corner. The beam caught a rusty metal box, half buried beneath old blueprints and gardening tools. My fingers trembled slightly as I pried it open. Inside, yellowed papers curled delicately, invoices, letters, and notes that looked like they were meant for me or maybe for someone else. I pulled out a faded envelope marked HOA correspondence. The ink was smudged, but I could just make out the words: property disputes, master key misuse, undue influence. A cold weight settled in my chest. Among the papers, a handwritten letter caught my eye. The handwriting was shaky, but unmistakable. Dad's. He'd warned me before, in his own way, about the HOA's tendency to overreach, about the thin line between community and control. I traced the words slowly. If they come for this house, remember, roots run deeper than walls. Watch the watchers. A short time later, I heard the floor creaked behind me, and I spun around. Emily stood at the top of the stairs, her expression unreadable. "Found anything?" she asked quietly. I nodded, carefully stacking the papers. "More than I hoped." She descended, the soft light catching the worry in her eyes. Together, we sifted through the papers, uncovering a pattern of abuse. Complaints buried, fines unfairly applied, and records of unauthorized use of the master key by Vivian herself. "This changes everything," Emily whispered, folding a letter with shaking hands. But it wasn't just about me anymore. Dad's fight, the legacy he left behind, it was tangled up in this web of control. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed the discoveries in my mind, feeling the gravity of what we'd found. The oak tree outside stood tall in the moonlight, leaves casting ghostly shadows on the porch, a silent witness to decades of struggle. The next morning, I called Helen. Her voice was cautious, almost hesitant. "I didn't expect you to find that much." "Neither did I admitted, but it confirms what I suspected. Vivian's been crossing every line." We talked for hours, piecing together stories, rumors, half-truths. Helen shared more than she'd dared before. Secret meetings, altered records, pressure tactics. "It's a house of cards," she said, "and you've got the wind." I smiled grimly. Time to blow it down. Later that week, Emily and I mapped out a plan. We'd take the papers to a lawyer, prepare for the fight ahead. But first, I needed more. Concrete proof. Something Vivian couldn't deny. I started monitoring the property's perimeter more closely, adjusting cameras to catch every move, especially any unauthorized access. One evening, as the sun dipped low, casting long amber streaks across the neighborhood, I spotted a shadow moving near the back gate. A familiar figure. Vivian. She didn't know the cameras were watching. I recorded everything. The way she fumbled with the lock, the furtive glances around the yard, the hesitant touch on the oak tree's bark, as if trying to mark her territory. When she finally left, I felt a strange mix of triumph and dread. Emily wrapped her arm around me. "You're turning the tide." I knew she was right. The game was changing. But Vivian wasn't just some petty bureaucrat. She was cunning, dangerous, and cornered animals fight the hardest. That night, I revisited Dad's letter one more time, fingers tracing the faded ink. "Watch the watchers." I was watching now, and I wasn't about to blink. The call from the lawyer came late afternoon, breaking the usual hum of the house. Emily was in the kitchen, humming softly as she washed dishes. I stepped into the hall, phone pressed to my ear. "Mark," said the voice, sharp but warm, "I've reviewed the documents you sent. You're sitting on a solid case. Trespassing, unauthorized use of master keys, harassment. It's all here." A weight lifted, even if just a little. "We need to move carefully," she continued. "I suggest documenting every incident from now on. Cameras, recordings, and definitely keep those letters and notices." I glanced toward the window where the oak tree stood silhouetted against the sinking sun. Silent but steady. Emily joined me then, drying her hands. "Sounds like the fight's turning." "Yeah," I said, swallowing hard, "but it's far from over." That night, we set up extra cameras around the property, discreet, no blinking lights to alert. I programmed them to capture all entrances and vulnerable spots. The house became a fortress of silent watchers. Each beep and flash of a recording felt like a small victory, a reclaiming of control. Days passed, and the harassment only grew bolder. One morning, I found a notice nailed to the gate, threatening legal action for supposed unauthorized structural changes. The irony stung. The only real change was our surveillance setup. Emily rubbed my back as I crumpled the paper. "You're doing the right thing." One evening, I caught movement on the back camera, a figure creeping close to the oak tree. The grainy footage revealed Vivian herself, clutching a small device in her hand. Curiosity mixed with rage as I zoomed in. She wasn't just trespassing, she was tampering with the security system. I saved the footage, heart racing. "Did she just try to disable the cameras?" Emily whispered beside me. I nodded, "And we have proof." I called Helen that night, voice hushed. "You won't believe what I found." She sighed, relief and fear tangled together. "Vivian's losing it. You need to keep your guard up." As the days grew shorter and shadows lengthened, I realized this wasn't a simple dispute. Vivian was desperate, cornered. Emily's steady presence became my anchor. One afternoon she showed me an old photo album, snapshots of Dad, the house, the oak tree in its early days. "That tree survived storms we never saw," she said softly. "You gonna survive this too?" Her words settled something deep inside me. That weekend, I installed hidden microphones inside the main entrance. If Vivian or anyone from the board came unannounced, I'd have the proof to expose them. One afternoon, the doorbell rang. Emily opened it to Vivian's sharp glare, clipboard ready. I stayed just out of sight, camera rolling. Vivian's voice was cold, clipped. "You're in violation of multiple HOA rules. This is your final warning." Emily responded coolly, "You're not authorized to enter without notice. Please leave." Vivian's eyes flicked to the security camera peeking from the eaves. I wasn't aware. The hesitation was brief, but telling. After Vivian left, Emily turned to me, eyes bright with quiet satisfaction, caught in the act. Every piece of evidence stacked like bricks in a wall I was building, one strong enough to hold back the storm. But beneath the calm, I knew this was just the start. Outside, the oak tree swayed gently in the breeze, leaves whispering promises of resilience. And I wasn't about to let that legacy be torn down. Helen's knock came late afternoon, soft, hesitant, like she wasn't sure if I'd even open the door. I wasn't expecting her, but after everything, maybe I should have been. She stepped inside, eyes flicking nervously toward the oak tree visible through the window. "Mark," she started, voice barely above a whisper, "I can't keep this to myself anymore." I motioned to the kitchen table, the papers and folders from the basement sprawled between us. "What is it?" Her hands trembled as she pulled out a worn envelope, yellowed with age and sealed with a faded HOA emblem. It's from the board's archives. I kept it hidden." Curiosity and caution warred inside me as I broke the seal. Inside were documents showing Vivian's manipulation, forged meeting minutes, altered violation records, and worst of all, a list of unauthorized master key uses, including entries into my property. Helen's eyes darted around, voice hushed. "She's been covering her tracks for years. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner." The weight of her confession settled between us like a storm waiting to break. I thanked her quietly, realizing this was the key to everything. Proof not just of harassment, but of deliberate abuse of power. That evening, Emily and I pored over the documents. Each page was a thread unraveling Vivian's carefully woven facade. "I can't believe it," Emily muttered, running a hand through her hair. "This goes way beyond what we imagined." I glanced out the window. The oak tree stood resilient against the fading light, its branches stretching like a silent vow. The next move was clear. We'd have to expose Vivian's lies, but carefully. One misstep, and Vivian could spin the narrative back against us. Helen stayed in touch, offering insider insights and tips about upcoming meetings and board decisions. One night, we devised a plan to invite Vivian to a neighborhood gathering under the guise of reconciliation, but secretly record everything. The day arrived with a mix of anticipation and dread. Vivian showed up, impeccably dressed, clipboard in hand, her smile sharp and calculating. Emily greeted her warmly, wearing her nurse's uniform, the symbol of calm authority amid chaos. I positioned myself discreetly, phone recording hidden. Vivian launched into her usual spiel, complaints, threats, demands, but beneath the polished veneer, cracks began to show. Emily asked pointed questions, refusing to be intimidated. Vivian faltered when confronted with the leaked documents Helen had provided, unable to maintain her composure. The recording captured every slip, every hesitation. After the gathering, Helen whispered, "You've got her now." I felt a surge of cautious hope. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about setting things right for everyone tangled in Vivian's web. Later, as the night deepened, I revisited Dad's letter from the basement. Watch the watchers. I was finally doing just that. The oak tree outside seemed to stand taller in the moonlight, a reminder that roots, once deep enough, could weather any storm. The day of the neighborhood gathering arrived, wrapped in a heavy heat that made the air stick to your skin like a warning. I was ready, more ready than I'd been in months. Emily had spent the morning double-checking her nurse's uniform, that quiet symbol of order amid chaos. I double-checked the phone's recording settings, made sure the cameras were angled just right, then took a steadying breath. Vivian showed up like clockwork, sharp heels clicking on the sidewalk, clipboard clutched tight. She smiled, all practiced charm, but there was something off, a flicker of unease behind those eyes. Emily greeted her without hesitation. "Vivian," she said, voice warm but firm, "we're glad you could join us." I stayed just out of sight, camera rolling. Vivian launched into her usual spiel, rules, infractions, what she called necessary enforcement. But Emily wasn't having it. "You say enforcement, but it's selective, isn't it? Targeted. You've used your master key without notice, entered private property. That's more than enforcement, it's intimidation." The room fell quiet. Vivian's smile faltered, the poise slipping just a fraction. "Those are allegations," she said, voice tight. I stepped forward then, phone raised subtly. Allegations, backed by documents Helen Garcia gave me. I played the recording of Vivian admitting unauthorized entries, her voice cracking under pressure. The faces around us shifted, curious, surprised, some skeptical. Vivian's gaze snapped to Helen in the back. The older woman looked small but resolute, her hands steady as she nodded. Emily stepped closer, eyes locked on Vivian. "Your reign ends here." The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Vivian stammered, This is... But the crowd had already shifted. Neighbors whispered, eyes narrowing at the once powerful board president. After the gathering, Emily and I stood beneath the oak tree. The late afternoon sun filtered through the leaves, casting dappled light on the ground. "I think this is it," Emily said softly. I nodded. "It's the first real crack." That night, Helen reached out again, sending more documents, emails, text messages, proof of Vivian's manipulation of meeting minutes and HOA funds. The pieces were falling into place. We arranged a meeting with the lawyer, bringing everything together, recordings, letters, Helen's testimony. "This is a comprehensive case," the lawyer said, eyes scanning the files. "The HOA can't ignore this. They'll have to act." I felt a cautious surge of hope. But even as we planned, I knew Vivian wouldn't go down quietly. The next morning, a note slipped under the door, a thinly veiled threat wrapped in legal jargon. "Be careful," Emily said, voice steady but eyes wary. Outside, the oak tree swayed gently in the morning breeze, its branches whispering promises of endurance. I reached out and touched the bark, grounding myself. This was more than a fight for a house. It was a fight for truth, for legacy, for the kind of justice Dad always believed in. That morning, the air felt heavier, as if the whole neighborhood was holding its breath. The thin envelope tucked under our door earlier wasn't just a warning, it was a signal. Vivian was pushing back, and hard. Emily paced the living room, arms crossed tight. "They're trying to scare you." "Yeah, and it's not working," I said, though my voice didn't carry the confidence I wanted. Every shadow in the house felt like eyes watching. Every knock a possible threat. I fired off an email to our lawyer, received a veiled threat, documenting all communications, advice. The reply was quick, concise. "Stay calm, keep all evidence. We'll need everything when this goes public." That night, Helen showed up unexpectedly, carrying a stack of papers and a USB drive. Her hands shook less now, determination shining through her eyes. "We've got more than I thought," she said quietly. Emails between Vivian and the board, plans to silence dissenters, even shady deals about community funds. I ran my fingers through my hair. "This isn't just harassment, it's corruption." Helen nodded grimly. "And you're the only one brave enough to stand against it." The next day, the neighborhood gossip mill churned faster. Some neighbors whispered about Vivian's sudden cold shoulder. Others avoided eye contact. At the grocery store, a woman I barely knew muttered, "Poor Mark, going up against the whole board?" I caught her eye and gave a small, tight smile. It wasn't pity I wanted, it was respect. Emily squeezed my hand. "You're not alone." Back home, I began compiling the growing mountain of evidence. Recordings, letters, documents, all organized meticulously. Each file was a brick in the case we were building. The oak tree outside stood tall as ever, a steady reminder that some things withstand every storm. Then came the worst of it. One evening, the security cameras caught a group of unfamiliar faces lurking near the property line, moving quietly, shadows blending with dusk. My heart hammered. Emily called the police immediately and I reviewed the footage, fingers trembling. The intruders were clearly attempting to tamper with the security setup, cutting wires, checking locks. The officers took the report seriously, promising increased patrols. That night, as I sat beneath the soft glow of the porch light, I felt a mix of fear and resolve. Emily joined me, wrapping a blanket around both of us. "We've come this far. We can't back down now." I nodded, eyes fixed on the oak's twisting branches silhouetted against the starry sky. The battle wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about standing for something bigger, justice, dignity, truth. And I was ready to see it through. The following days blurred into a tense dance. Meetings with lawyers, calls to the police, and long nights poring over every scrap of evidence. Each new document felt like a step closer to breaking Vivian's grip. Emily and I sat one evening at the kitchen table, stacks of papers between us. The lamp cast a warm glow over her determined face as she flipped through the latest batch of HOA emails Helen had sent over. "These are worse than I thought," she said, voice low but fierce. "She's not just bullying you, she's embezzling, forging records." I shook my head, rubbing the bridge of my nose. "It's insane. But at least we're seeing the full picture now." Outside, the oak tree's branches swayed gently in the autumn breeze, its leaves turning golden, unenchained by the turmoil that had taken over our lives. The next day, I prepared for what would be the most critical HOA board meeting yet. The community center room felt smaller than before, the fluorescent lights harsher, buzzing softly as I took my seat. Vivian was already there, radiant in her usual armor of arrogance. Around her, a handful of board members sat stiffly, eyes darting nervously whenever mine met theirs. The room held a charged silence as I stood to speak. "I'm here to present evidence of gross misconduct," I began, voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. "Unauthorized entries, falsified records, harassment of residents, these aren't just rule violations, they're crimes." I laid out the case carefully, showing photos of tampered cameras, playing audio recordings of unauthorized conversations, and displaying Helen's documents. The crowd murmured. Some faces softened, others hardened. Vivian stood, voice sharp. "This is a witch hunt, baseless accusations to undermine the HOA's authority." Helen, seated quietly in the back, rose then, her voice shaking but resolute. "I've seen the truth. I hid these papers because I was scared, but it's time to stop the lies." Her confession silenced the room. Vivian's confident mask cracked, her glare slicing toward Helen like a dagger. Emily squeezed my hand under the table, a silent reminder that I wasn't alone. After the meeting, the community buzzed with whispers and speculation. Some neighbors approached, offering support and apologies for their earlier doubts. I felt a cautious hope stirring. That night, Emily and I stood under the oak tree, the crisp air filled with the scent of fallen leaves. "It's more than a tree now," I said quietly. "It's everything we're fighting for." She nodded, eyes bright. "And we're just getting started." The courtroom was packed, more than I expected. Faces from the neighborhood filled the seats, some eager, others skeptical. The buzz of whispered conversations bounced off the high ceilings, tension thick enough to taste. Emily squeezed my hand as we took our places. The oak tree's image, framed and hanging on the wall, watched over us, a silent symbol of everything at stake. The prosecutor wasted no time. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we lay bare a pattern of abuse, unauthorized entries, forged documents, intimidation. This is not just a HOA dispute, it's a violation of trust and law." I watched Vivian's face, tight, controlled but cracks showing in the veneer. Her once commanding presence had faded into thin desperation. My lawyer stood next, calm, precise, laying out the evidence piece by piece, the recordings of Vivian admitting to unauthorized access, Helen's testimony delivered with quiet courage, the tampered security footage. Every document, every letter meticulously organized. When it was my turn, I stepped forward, voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. "This house, this neighborhood, it's more than a place. It's legacy, family, dignity. My father planted that oak tree not just to beautify the yard, but to remind us that roots run deep. We protect what we love." I glanced at the photo of Dad beneath the tree. The room was silent, the weight of those words settling like a heavy cloak. Vivian tried to stand, to argue, but the judge cut her off. "Ms. Caldwell, your actions have been documented extensively. The evidence speaks for itself." The community watched, many nodding in relief or disbelief. After hours of testimony, the judge called a recess. Outside, the air was crisp, carrying whispers of relief and quiet triumph. Neighbors approached, some to offer congratulations, others to share their own stories of struggle. Helen found me near the oak tree, her eyes glistening. "Thank you, Mark. You gave us all a voice." Emily smiled, brushing a stray hair from my forehead. "We did this together." As the courtroom doors closed behind us, I felt the weight lift, finally. Not because the fight was over, but because truth had won this round. And the oak tree outside stood taller than ever, its roots deep in soil and justice. The courtroom emptied slowly, voices soft, like the storm had passed, but the air still held that lingering chill. Emily and I walked outside, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the pavement. The neighborhood felt different now, lighter, as if truth had begun to cleanse the heavy weight Vivian had draped over us all. The oak tree, framed in the courtroom and now standing tall just beyond the windows of our home, felt like a quiet guardian. Its leaves rustled gently in the breeze, whispering stories of endurance and time. I stepped onto the porch, tracing my fingers along the familiar rough bark. That tree had outlasted seasons I never saw and storms I never felt. It held memories of my father's steady hands, of laughter, of quiet evenings spent dreaming about a future that felt ours. This victory, it wasn't just mine. It belonged to every neighbor who'd felt powerless, every voice drowned out by fear or silence. Emily joined me, wrapping an arm around my waist. "You did more than defend a house," she said softly. "You restored a community." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Dad always said roots run deep. Maybe that's what we all need to remember. The battle wasn't just about a piece of property or HOA rules. It was about standing up when it mattered most, about holding on to dignity even when it felt like the world wanted to strip it away. The fight had taken everything: time, peace, nights spent wrestling with doubt. But looking out at the neighborhood now, I felt something stronger than relief. I felt hope. And that oak tree? It wasn't just a tree anymore. It was a symbol, a legacy of strength, of standing firm. As the sun dipped lower, casting the house in golden light, I realized this story wasn't just mine to tell. It belonged to anyone who's ever been told they're too small to matter, too quiet to be heard. Because sometimes the deepest roots grow in the darkest soil. And sometimes the quietest voices echo the loudest. Where are you watching from? Have you faced moments when standing up felt impossible? Share your stories below. I want to hear how you found your strength. If you want more stories about fights for justice, legacy, and dignity, don't forget to subscribe. This isn't just my story, it's ours.